Hi everyone, Heather here with Heather's Fine Arts and Illustrations. Today I'm going to be doing a coloring tutorial on snails and shrooms featuring the Derwent Inktense ink pencils. Here on my art easel, I have one of my exclusive Patreon Tier 2 illustrations titled Snails and Shrooms. And I'm going to be using my Derwent Inktense ink pencils to color this beauty in. Now, as you can see, the video has been sped up. Should you want to see the slowed down version, the real-time tutorial, I invite you to join me on my Patreon page, and I have added the link down in the description below. Right now, I have my cold press 140-pound watercolor paper that I'm going to be using. I opted for the cold press instead of the hot press because I wanted a little more texture than the hot press normally gives me. I have to get my original image, which you can see over in the right-hand side, onto the cold press. And you can do that by using transfer paper or a light box, so forth. I've used one of the lightest blues available in the set of 72 pencils to outline the image. Okay, I opted for the blue. The reason being it's a cool color, and I drew it on so lightly that it's really not going to matter with the colors that I've selected, because I'm kind of going with a watercolor rainbowy psychedelic feel to this piece. So I need to go ahead, since this is a type of pencil, and you have to forgive me. I have MS, and my MS brain is not working with me today, so please have patience with how I'm talking and so forth. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fasten down my paper with a masking tape. You can use artist tape, which I would recommend, but since I opted with the masking tape, I have about a 1/4 of an inch space around the piece of paper, so it's really not going to matter uh, if, you know, when I pull up the tape, if I tear a little bit of that, because my artwork is centered more into the center of the paper. So I'm not concerned about that. But you want to go ahead, unless you're using a watercolor artist block, uh, you want to go ahead and fasten down your paper. We activate the Derwent Inktense ink pencils with water, and you need to treat this type of product as a watercolor. Okay, so make sure you have brushes and clean water and all that when you start, and we'll get into that in a little bit. The main thing is, once you have the image transfer on the paper, you want to go ahead and look at your original paper that you have, and look at your transfer paper. Make sure all the elements are in there. Now, I have about 5 brushes I'm going to be using for this piece. I have a small Filbert's brush, about 3 linear brushes, and like I said, clean water, rags, and I also have a small angle brush that I will be using. Angle brushes happens to be one of my favorite pieces, but because there's so many key little itty bitty kind of areas we're going to be coloring in here, linear brushes and the Filbert brushes come really in handy for that detailed work. A little bit about Derwent Inktense. They're kind of a color pencil that meets watercolors. The pigment is an ink pigment, so you can apply it to the paper a couple different ways. You can go ahead and sketch it on like you'll see me doing, and when you sketch it on, you want to go ahead and be very loose and very light with your coloring, because once, like I said, it is activated with water, it becomes permanent, and it is so vibrant. It really makes the color pops when that activation happens. Uh, Another way you can do it, as you can see, is the brush tip to the pencil tip and apply it straight on there. You're going to have very little water on your brush when you do this. And as you can see, I always have a spare piece of paper alongside of me, so I can go ahead and try out my colors. This way I can also get a little bit of that excess water and pigment off of my brush, should I think it's going to be a little too strong. So that's why I always have a scratch piece of paper nearby to do so. So right now we're just going to go ahead and get the base coats into that underneath of that mushroom cap. I like to apply very light layers with this. Something unique about this, if you were going to use normal watercolor pencils, okay, the watercolor pencils, you can always reactivate the water unless you put a sealant on it, so forth. The Inktense, once you've activated it and you have a very limited window to do your work before it dries, they're permanent. There's not going to be any of that pigment carrying up as you add the next layer into your work. That is the beauty of these, okay? This type of product allows you to do countless layer upon layers and create this gorgeous translucent effect, almost like a stained glass window, okay? And it allows you to play with the colors. So you have this, let's say if you're gonna, create green, instead of diving in for the green right away, you could layer it with a beautiful yellow, a beautiful blue. And then, as you have this layer, what you're seeing is the two of them laying atop of one another, and it's creating that illusion of this gorgeous green. So you have it's a different mindset when you use these, but it's also a very refreshing mindset. I have never encountered a product like this that is so rewarding. I mean, I'm a very vivid colorist and a muralist, and colors to me is like diamonds, to jewelry. You can't get enough of that color. It's that need to dive in and explore the world of colors and mixing it's you can take your red and your blue with your watercolor pencils and you can make purple, okay, and that's blending them all together. Like I said, once you have your watercolor pencils, it's going to reactivate or activate every time you add water. This allows you to build, and it's when you're coloring it and painting with this, and on whatever medium, paper, wood, fabric, what have you, you have to have a little bit of different thinking here and know what it's going to look like in your mind toward the end. That's why it's so crucial with this to have this extra sheet of paper here, because number one, once you look at the tin and you see all these glorious pencils, okay, the pencils don't they're just not as bright as when you activate them with water, okay. I recommend anyone who uses the Derwent Inktense to make a swatch chart so you actually see the true colors of these pencils. So as you can see, I'm laying in several colors down, some yellows and some pinks. And like I said, if you join me over on Patreon to see the actual real-time, slowed-down version of this tutorial, I list all the materials, all the colors and everything. So it's uh, really nice for you to see what colors. I'm not going to go into the exact colors I'm using during this tutorial. But you can see as I layer in the various colors, while they're wet, if they're on your paper already, you can blend them, okay? And you can also, should you want to go ahead and say, let's say I want to mix my green, okay, and you could take a little bit into a little palette, shave a little bit of it off of, your yellow and blue, and you could mix it that way. Or you could mix it on paper like you've seen I've done once the water's been added to it. Or, like I said, you could do like the glazing effect and just keep stacking and stacking and stacking layer upon layer of color. As you can see, the highlights and the brightness of the colors create gorgeous highlights here. Going ahead and adding a little bit of the shading too now underneath these mushroom caps. And that's going to make these lighter colors really stand out. Something unique to the Derwent set of 72 of the Inktense pencils is, for me, they're pretty much a medium range of pencils. There's no really super light, and there is, it's that medium to dark half of the colors. However, they do have the white pencil in there, so this gives you, like I said, this liberty of kind of changing up your normal thinking when you know you use colored pencils or watercolor pencils, and allows you to mix the pencils. So you can lighten up the pencils by using, or the pigment, by using the white. You can mix your colors on the side. You can do the brush tip to pencil tip, and you can also color it on there like a regular colored pencil and add your water. So you have lots of options with these. Now, as you can see, I've already added that yellow down there. I'm adding that blue in there. And that's making a nice combination of, you can see that darker blue fading into that yellow, which is making green. Another thing about these pencils is they can create a very dreamlike watercolor effect. You know, depending on how much water you use. Right now, I'm using such a minimal amount of water onto my paper. I don't want to have a wash of this. I want it to be very refined in my coloring here, or my painting, so forth. So the less water, the more refined, the more water, and there's nothing wrong with you adding a lot more water with these pencils, okay? It'll just be a lot looser and a lot more dreamier effect than the more tailored and refined look I'm going for. Going ahead and adding some more of that blue, bringing out those shadows. Because I really want to make these mushrooms really pop and come to life. Now, as you can see on the mushroom stem that I'm working on now, do you see how loose I had sketched in and how lightly I had sketched in with my Derwent pencil? Now I'm doing, you know, the actual brush dipped in the water and taking it straight to the paper, not the brush tip to the pencil tip with this. So this would be more the style of what you would do with the normal watercolor pencils. The thing with the Derwent Inktense pencils also is, let's say you make an oopsie or a mistake, okay? Don't feel like because it's permanent and you have, you know, this ink that, oh, what am I going to do? I'll just go ahead and tear out my whole entire piece and start again. Not needed, okay? Rethink your steps. See if you can, you know, of course, darken it or, you know, change it with a different color, but you also have that white. And, you know, as long as you add that white once it's dry, and you can pretty much lighten it to almost going right back to your paper in case that happens. So you can basically start all over. And the thing, like I said about this, is the layers are endless. There's no buildup like you have like with acrylics and with like colored pencils with that waxy bloom. This is it's nice, flat, smooth on your paper. So there's lots of definite pros with the Derwent Inktense. See how rich these colors are? I mean, by just adding a little bit of water, from the difference from what you see how I've sketched it onto the paper to once it's been added with the water, the colors are just magnificent. Now, of course, there are other colors, you know, in the set of 72, you know, that if you wanted to do not as a colorful piece, say you want to do more of an earthy piece, there are tons of options in there. So don't just think, oh, that Derwent only has, you know, the bright, shocking, you know, colors. This just happens to be the colors I'm using. They have a wide range in the box, in this set, but it also gives you that liberty. Well, if you want to do more earthy tones, they have tons of earth tone colors in there. And of course, once again, I go back to the fact that these are so unique, being that ink, you know, that short window you have to activate your once the ink's been activated to dry, and then add another layer on there. It's just phenomenal, the amount of layers you can build and the things you can create with these. Like I said, if you're unsure what color it is from looking at the pencil. That's why you have that scratch piece of paper there. Do not hesitate to use your scratch piece of paper. If you need to, activate it with water to see the actual true color before you apply it onto your piece. Now, if I'm going to add superfine detail like I'm doing right now to the mushroom caps, of course, I'm going to go ahead and sharpen my pencil to a pretty strong point, lightly. Uh, touch the paper and draw in your details, because once we add that water to, with the linear brush to these fine detailed areas, it's really going to stand out and make it come to life. Now, something very unique, I have to say also with the Derwent Inktense pencils, is the fact that you can sharpen these things and they don't break, unlike some of the other brands that I've worked with. They don't break. There's no crumbling. There's no nothing. And once you have that point on that tip of that pencil, it seems to last forever. Even when I'm doing the wet brush tip to the pencil tip, they last, and that's kind of refreshing, because I'm really tired of going to my pencil sharpener every few minutes with normal colored pencils, and or even with watercolor pencils, and I'm like, where's my pencil going? I need it, get a replacement. And to me, this is one of the great qualities. I don't have to keep being interrupted as an artist going back to sharpen my pencil. So I'm really thrilled at this. I have to say, most of you know I am a Derwent US influencer. I am not getting paid for this. This is my honest opinion of this product, and I I I've used Derwent before with my pencils, drawing pencils, and graphitints and all this, and I have no complaints at all with the Derwent Inktense. The biggest thing I have found, like I said, is I'm not a watercolorist at all. It's never been, not that I can't do it, it's just never been a media that I really want to dive into. And with the Derwent Inktense pencils, it's allowed me to do that. And I like learning and expanding and going on different artistic journeys with various mediums. And this is a quite fascinating product. And I do encourage you, if don't be scared by this product. I've heard a lot of people in my classes, over on Patreon, tell me, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. It sounds too complicated and too difficult. By saying you can't, you never will. By opening up your mind and exploring it, you can. There is nothing in any of my tutorials that you cannot do, as long as you're willing to do. If you come in and say, no, you can't, you're already, shooting yourself in the foot. And that's not what you want to do. That's shutting off your artistic and creative mind. As you can see, I'm adding a little more detail here into the mushroom caps and into the stems. I talk about applying the color very lightly with these pencils. They are so rich and vibrant in their pigment. You want to go light, okay? It's easier to add more layers of, whether it be the same color or some different color, to create that rich, deep color than it is to lighten your color, okay? And it's always go from light to dark. That's all I can say. And as far as pressure, you want to go ahead and keep it light. You can always go back and darken up, but these are so heavily pigmented, you want to go ahead and have a lighter hand at this. As you can see, once it's activated with water, you can see I barely put any pressure in this blue. And look at this. I mean, it's majestic. I also recommend to make sure you have a rag, a washcloth, or an artist towel, something nearby to go ahead and wipe off the excess paper or pigment. Uh, or pardon me, back up. Like I said, MS brain, you want to go ahead and wipe off the excess water and also the excess pigment onto your towel before you apply it to your paper and to your piece. Going ahead and adding a little more finer detail in here. I like the fact that I can build with endless layers. It just makes your piece able to to grow and add to character to your paintings, and it brings it to life. And that's what art is all about, is bringing your creativity, your creations, and your characters and your drawings to life. I'm just taking my time and adding, like I said, more and more layers. You can see how it like glazes over on the other colors. Yet we had a solid blue pencil, and now look at it. It's turned blue green because we had that yellow underneath it. Another thing you want to do is always make sure that you have a clean jar of water, especially when you're using the darker colors. You do have that pigment transferring back into your brush. So when you rinse it off in there, watch your water. That's a crucial element to any, whether you're using acrylics or watercolor, regular watercolors, or these ink pencils. Make sure you have clear water, because you don't want to, say you're working in blue, then you switch to yellow and you dive it in there, and now you have greenish water. So clean water is definitely a necessity. Now, a lot of you have seen, or you may even use a blow dryer in between this. I find that the amount of water that I've used, which was very, very minimal. I do not need to have a blow dryer nearby to have this dry. This dries within seconds, so if you had more water on there and you really saturate your paper, then you might want to go ahead and have a blow dryer nearby, just to go ahead and speed up the process of dry time, so you can continue on with your piece. I said, once that area is dry, you can go ahead and, like you can see, go ahead and sketch on there or add more pigment on there. Your bottom layers, and I cannot stress this enough, your bottom layers of color are not going to reactivate as long as you've completely activated your first layers. They're not gonna, reactivate and blend and muddy your other colors that you've added to it. So just make sure, like I said, you activate all your colors on every layer, and then you can go ahead and just keep adding and adding and adding with no worries of, am I going to pick up, that green into this fuchsia, So that's what's really nice about it. Taking this fuchsia down a little bit into that green. And you can see we've created a totally different kind of green that's more on the warm side, because that fuchsia is more on the warm side. This is a 1/4 inch Filbert brush that I am using. And getting in there and just darkening that area there underneath that snail. Because we can't have the snail hanging off the mushroom. He's got to be kind of sitting on there with his whole entire body. You know, as I said earlier, you don't need to, you know, you have to rethink how you would, you know, from watercolor pencils or watercolors to these pencils. It's a totally different mindset. Okay, but what you don't need to rethink is where your shadows are and where your highlights are. That's still going to be the same. You're still, you know, if you have a lighter area where that light is coming in on your piece, of course it's going to be a lighter color. Your shadows are going to be like, you know, like as you can see right now underneath this snail, you know, on this mushroom. We can't have the little snail over here just sitting in space. He needs to be anchored down onto that mushroom as he's peering over, looking at the fairy below. And you can kind of see our ghosted in there. But you can see, as I told you, I had outlined it in that light, the one of the lightest blue pencils that is offered in the set. It is not picking up into my other colors, okay? And if it does, that minute trace amount of blue is not going to be bothersome, especially with, you know, the background color I have planned for this and the colors that I'm using. That this blue is almost a welcome color should there be any transference of color. Adding a little bit of shadow here onto this side of this mushroom and underneath that little baby snail. Taking my time and strengthening up those crevices and tears of the mushroom cap. You can see by now, I mean, I've added like about 14, 15 different layers on here, and there is no buildup of paint or anything. And it is just a nice media to use. I have like 3 or 4 pencils in my hand, which makes it easy. I mean, you have them in your hand. You're just doing brush to tip, and you know, just add a little bit of water, tip it onto that brush or to the pencil, and go for it. And cleanup is pretty minimal. What do you have to clean? Your brushes and, you know, your water jar, and that's pretty much it. And so that's another convenience with these. Now, when I said I was working on cold press, as you can see a little bit of that paper texture coming through, which is fine because it's giving character automatically to my mushrooms. So be sure, you know, like I said, you don't have to use, you know, hot press. With these pencils, you have a wide range of canvases and papers and stuff, and even materials you can use with these. So that's really, really nice. On all surfaces with the Derwent Inktense, they are permanent. So please be warned, if you're using these, put an art smock on or wear, you know, casual clothes, you know, your art clothes, whatever. So in case you do drop a pencil or the brush and it gets on your clothes, it will be permanent. Go ahead and brighten this up. Now you can see I used the same yellow that I did on the first base coat. I went ahead and added it, touched it back to that paper, and it just made that yellow area, that highlighted area where that light is shining on that mushroom cap. Look at how it just pops. And I mean that mushroom, wow, you know right there that is that light source. That color just made that top of that mushroom go, wow, okay, that sun must be shining down on these mushroom caps. I'm adding a hint of this color all the way through in various areas just to, like I said, add that spark, that pizzazz into it, that light, to add that character in there to make these mushroom caps and that give that 3D effect, that illusion. Going ahead and add a little more shading in here. Adding a little more of that pink color back into these other mushrooms. showing continuity, but I'm not doing it in a very set pattern. These are wild fantasy mushrooms growing out in some kind of field or forest, and I don't want them all to be set in stone, because that would make your art, your painting and that very boring. Now see, I've added that fuchsia into that blue area that's already dried, and it's made a nice, beautiful, like violet. So, you know, I've used, even though I have tons of layers, I've used very few pencils to this piece. But every time I add a layer, it's either making it a darker version of that color, or it's creating a new color. So that's another good thing about these pencils. Going back up here, I'm darkening that shadow area a little more and adding some little spots or freckles to, I call them mushroom freckles, to the mushroom cap, just adding more character and details to it. And I still am using my Filbert brush. It's one of my tinier brushes, so you can do detailed work with this. I mean, you can see how the colors are not muddied. I mean, we've have what, a blue, green, fuchsia, yellow, you know, added onto this, and it's just like it never muddies. And that also has something to do with the colors that I've chose too. I'm sure if you took the whole entire set of 72 and put them on a piece of paper, you know, and colored them over, we'd kind of have a muddied color. But um, you know, you have to, you know, use your common sense. You know what I mean. As you can see here, you can see how I clean, you know, dumped my brush into, or dunked my brush into the water and kind of wiped it off. Like I said, a little bit of water, a little bit of color goes a long way. Now, of course, when I get to the background, you know, we're going to be using a lot more water back there, so I can cover that area quite rapidly, you know, with a wash, and go from there. Going ahead and adding some of the finer detail and the freckles and stuff to that mushroom. And like I said, I do encourage you to come join me over on Patreon. It's www.patreon.com. Heather Valentine. I have 3 different tiers. There, tier 2 and tier 3 offer tons of real-time tutorials. And work in all different types of medium. I cover colored pencils, markers, acrylics, pastels, and of course the Derwent Inktense ink pencils. Oh, and before I forget, make sure you click the subscribe button here on YouTube. Give me a little click on that little blue little thumb, and thank you in advance for doing so and for joining my, subscribing to my YouTube channel. It means the world to me. Adding a little bit of this green. Getting a little bit of that shadow in there, adding some of these tears, very subtle tears into that mushroom cap. Now, as you can see from the my original illustration, you can see how I had the line art on there. And you are able to download, this is one of the images you can download from my Tier 2 Patreon section, and you can go ahead, print, and color or paint this image. So it's one of those little nice perks or rewards that I have offered. This is coming out really, really pretty. The colors, I cannot stress enough or tell you enough how fun this media is to play with the colors. They're so vibrant and they're so cheery and happy. And you know, in times like this, you know, it's fun to get away from, you know, while we're all staying indoors. It's fun to you know, focus on something that's positive and happy and can change kind of your whole mental um, thing, you know, about, well, I'm stuck inside, so I can't do this. No, you can escape into the world of art and colors and paint to your heart's desire and get away from all the news and stuff for a bit. Give you a nice different mindset too. Can be amazed with just 72 pencils how many different colors you can create. I mean, the possibilities are endless with these. And that's kind of true with any kind of media that you use. You know, you blend colors. I mean, I I'm one not to say, okay, I'm sitting here coloring the sun and I'm just going to color it yellow. Okay, no, there's oranges and reds and stuff. If you look at the sun, there's so many different shades and hues of that color. So why not, you know, you can dive in and you can create this with these, you know, and it's just, they're just great. Adding a little more shading here to this little mushroom cap. And I'm still working with my Filbert brush. You want to go ahead and like I said, pay attention to your highlights and your shading. Just because you have a different medium that you're using, you do not lose, you know, those basic techniques, you know, of, you know, you have to have shading and you have to have highlights and stuff. But what you are gaining with these is the ability, like I said, to create layer upon layer of endless colors and this richness, this deep richness of color that you can just reach on in there and grab. And I really do compare them like to a stained glass window. You know, you look at the sun coming through that stained glass, as I'm sure all of you have seen stained glass windows before, and the colors just are luxurious. And this is, for me, the best way I can describe Derwent Inktense is they're so jeweled like and have that quality of that glass, that translucent pigment that just you know, you can create some dynamic colorings and paintings with these. Making sure the way the fairy is, I have her positioned on the mushroom, I need to add a little bit of shading here so she's not floating off into space like we did with the snails. Want to go ahead and make sure that she is grounded. Now you can just see that she's penciled on in there, and so we need to make sure that her foot on this mushroom and the other mushroom behind it, that she is anchored onto that mushroom, so she's not floating. Doing a little bit around her dress here, because since my light source is shining down from the front cascading onto the mushrooms, and that with her dress covering that mushroom stalk, of course, there's going to be a natural shadow there. So I want to go ahead and get that in. I'm really not one to work with the back, doing the background first and coming up, not on something like this. It has a lot of detail. I rather work on the piece than worry about the background later. So I want to make sure I have my light source and all that anchored in first. Bringing down this outer line to that mushroom so that you can see you have that the mushroom stalks have that kind of round, you know, they're kind of round shape. Well, you want to go ahead and create that illusion. So you're going to have two shadows on the side of this mushroom, and as it comes around to where your light source is in that center of that stalk, you have this like 3D effect going on. So it's kind of darker on the side, and as it comes closer to the center, you want to make sure you have that highlight. Adding in some more of those tears in the mushroom caps. That brings it, that gives it character, you know. The darker you go, that means that the tears, the tears are further on into that mushroom. The lighter you are, that means those tears are going to be not as deep. And that's why I said it's best to work light, light to dark. You can always darken, but it's a lot harder to lighten unless you, like I said, you dive in and use the white pencil. And you want to be careful with that because, you know, as I've told you throughout this tutorial, you know, light is good. You want to make sure once you use that white pencil is like no other. You really apply that white and it goes on first, and you're sitting here going, well, that didn't cover that up right. Just wait until it dries, okay? It's just like how you see how I've activated these pencils with this water, how bright they are. The white will do the same. Trust me, it will. So a little goes a long way with these pencils. Going ahead and darkening in once again some of these other creases and tears into that mushroom, adding a little more shading where that snail is. I really cannot get over how vibrant these colors really, really are. They're the best way I can describe them is they're so jewel-like. And as you can see, I really don't go back and forth to my water jar or my water well often. You know, I keep going back to you know, it carries the pigment nice on my brush for that little bit. You know, like I said, my brush is so damp, you know, or is so lightly damp. Um, and it, you can see how much I've used that brush where I'm not dipping in to go get more water, so the pigment holds nicely on the bristles. Go ahead and darkening that up. It's fun just to sit back and take a look at what you have. And if you, you know, kind of step back and take a breather and look at your painting before you, you know, continuously add, you'll see your painting and your image, your artwork starts talking to you, and eventually it'll start guiding you into, this is what I need to do, this is where I need to add a little bit of color. um, in my tutorials, I often talk about, you know, how color speaks to you, and if you're open enough and willing to listen to it. I know that may sound so far-fetched to you, but it's true. It's kind of that artistic voice deep inside your soul that's going, yes, use this. It might not be the proper normal color that you'd use. And with art, there is nothing normal, okay? You don't have to stay in this little itty bitty box. You know, you want to listen to what your heart is telling you. It's fine to mix warm colors with cool colors. It's fine, you know, to you know, mix the oddest colors like fuchsia with green. And here with these, you're not ending up with like a gooey brown. You're ending up with this gorgeous, like, you know, almost like a foresty warm green. And you've added a cool color to a dark color, and you've made this other color. And as long as you listen to that voice and are willing to open up your mind, you know, and embrace it and go, wow, you know, look what I can do by you know, playing around with these colors. And this is a medium and you know, a pencil that you can really do that with. This allows you to think outside the box. And for me as an artist, I've been in the business for 40 years. I've worked with some of the biggest companies in the world: Nabisco, Pepsi-Cola, or Pepsi, Coca-Cola, there we go, Outback, um, Zephyr Hills, Sonoma Wine, Budweiser, Progresso. I mean, I've worked with these companies, and you know, I've played with so much of, you know, the art products and mediums and that, and it's just, you can never stop your artistic journey. You have to always be willing to, you know, expand your journey. You know, just because I work with those companies didn't mean I stopped, you know, exploring and growing. With art, you grow constantly, and this is, you know, this is, you know, is a terrific product to do that. So going ahead here and adding those little itty bitty mushroom freckles again, you know, or adding character. We're adding to, you know, the piece, so it's not a flat painting or coloring. You want it to come to life. You want to be able to look at this and reach on in and feel that you can grab that mushroom. And you do that by colors. You do that by shading. And you know, and that's the beauty of art. Remember, please look down in my links below, in my description. Join me on Patreon. And I will be back real soon with the second part to this tutorial. Once again, you can see the real-time tutorial of this piece in my Patreon group. Thank you.